Alright, welcome back. It turns out Skype didn't have permission to record my screen, so macOS decided to just send my desktop background. But now we have it fixed. So we're on this create project page now, and we have filled out the name, package name, and we're about to select the language. Um, we want to keep this at Kotlin because that is the hip, cool new language that Android has decided to adopt. And I can tell you it is much better than Java. And for the minimum API level, this is basically the value that will determine what versions of Android your app can run on. So I usually like choosing Lollipop because according to this, approximately 80% of devices have it, so it will run on the vast majority of them. So now we have to wait for Android Studio to sync our project for the first time. And while it's doing that, let me show you around what you'll be seeing. So right now, what Android Studio is doing, it created a project for us. Oh, it's done already. That's fast. Um, it created a project for us that has some views in here already, and it has some sample code to go with our view. Right now, if we were to deploy this app to our phone right now, you would see exactly this. Let me turn on that. There we go. That looks better. So I'm going to actually deploy this app to my phone, and if I choose that, advisor, now we have my phone screen up. So right now, what Android Studio is doing is building this sample code, um, and it's going to install it on my phone. And you can see the status down here. And there we go. We have our first app, but it doesn't do much. All it says is hello world. But as we can see, Android Studio's already done quite a bit of work for us. We didn't even have to type a single line of code, and we already have this wonderful sample app already displayed. So I'm going to move my phone off to the side right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to write some code. So with Android Studio, you have all these tabs and stuff. Um, you probably want to get rid of this build output. And the way you can do that is you can press this little minimize icon that gives you a lot more space. So let me explain what activities are before we go any further. Activities are basically what encapsulate views and associated code. Uh, every single activity you can think of as a certain screen, because on Twitter, for example, the main activity for Twitter would be that uh, the screen I showed you earlier that shows all of the uh, the top toolbar, the tweets, and these four buttons. That would be their main activity. And when you tapped into a tweet, that tweet itself would be an activity. So you can think of activities as sort of like web pages that have all of the views and their code. So what our main activity will do will be our entire app. Um, and it's going to have, as we said earlier, the list of cities, a little plus button in the corner, and a deletion feature when you tap on the cities. So this is what it'll end up looking like. So let's get creating. So first, what you want to do is you want to open up this activity main.xml file. This is Android Studio. And if you don't see it open, no worries. Just press the little arrow next to app, next to res, next to res, next to layout, and then double click on activity main. And there you have it. And if you see this instead of this view, just press text at the bottom and you'll be thrown into it. I'm going to disable this. One sec. Something like that. There we go. I have been requested to make my text bigger. Command plus does not work. Maybe like 16, 18. Okay. Get rid of that so we can see. All right. Is this better now? I think so. So, um, we've been thrown into this boilerplate layout, and what we can do next is just entirely get rid of this text view. So we just select it, get rid of it. We don't need hello world in our app. What we do also need to do is we need this long string, which is basically just saying to render a constraint layout, which is a view that you don't need to know about right now. And we just want to change this to relative. Did Android Studio just crash? Oh, it did. Okay. Good thing it autosaves. Perfect. Now I'll get rid of the text view again. And I'll change it to, please don't crash. Okay. It crashes every single time. This worked yesterday. Technology hates us. I swear. But don't worry, have backup Android Studio versions if we need them. If it crashes one more time, I'm switching it. Okay. Go to 3.5. We're going to load up the project that we made. Okay. Now we wait. Here we are. And if this crashes, I don't know what to do. Uh, these projects. Waiting for Android Studio to sync again. Let's hope. Let's all pray to Tim Apple that this doesn't happen again. Because I blame macOS Catalina. Try this. Oh, it didn't crash. Probably because it didn't show the autofill. But anyway, here we go. We have our relative layout all ready to go. And why did we change constraint layout to relative layout? Well, relative layout actually um, is a different type of layout that aligns views in a different way. So each view is aligned relative to each other on this screen, which basically means you can tell the layout, okay, I want this thing, this text box or whatever at the top of the screen, and below this one, 5 pixels down below it, I want this, and you can tell it so that if you move one thing, everything else moves with it. So I think it's very convenient, and it will be good for what we need to do later on. So what we are going to tinker around with is called the recycler view. And what recycler view is basically a list view, which obviously shows things in a list, but it's on steroids. Um, it's named recycler view because uh, when you're scrolling through the list, it will actually reuse different different tiles, and it'll just put content in there. It's what you need to know is that it's optimized and that it's very fast, and that's what everyone uses, and it shows things in a list. So it's actually not included with Android by default. So what we're going to do is you're going to open this Gradle scripts little button here, and then double click on module app. And this will open our Gradle build script, which basically tells Gradle, the build system, how to build the app. And one of the things that it does is that it tells it what the app depends on. So these are called dependencies, and one of the dependencies that we have is a recycler view. So I already have the snippet of code that we need to paste in to hit recycle view. This is basically just telling Android Studio to grab the recycle view code, and I will paste it in Twitch. Oh, I have to log into Twitch. There we are. Okay, there you go. You're going to want to put this in our dependencies section under the constraint layout and above JUnit if you have those. But anywhere in the dependencies will do. So Android Studio doesn't actually know about these changes now. As you can see, it's prompting us saying, Gradle files have changed since last project sync. We don't actually have the recycle view yet. What we need to do is press sync now, and it'll do all this wonderful stuff for us. There you go. It's done. Pretty fast. But now what we can do is we can use recycle view. And if Android Studio doesn't crash this time, it crashed. Pretty sure it's the autofill. I'm going to disable autofill so it doesn't crash. What would it be called? Autocomplete? Code completion. Don't show suggestions as I type. Hopefully this makes it not crash. Aha! There we go. It doesn't crash anymore. But that means I don't have the added luxury of just typing things. Dang. All right. But at least we can do things. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the recycle view that we just added as a dependency in our Gradle file. So to do that, we need to actually add the fully qualified name, which basically just means like the full path to it. And you can just start typing recycler view, and it will autofill for you. But in my case, since autofilling crashes Android Studio because I'm running a beta of Mac OS, because I'm not smart, it will not do that for me. It will also fill out, you know what? Cheating. There we go. That's what it'll do for you. Um, so this is some pretty typical boilerplate code that it automatically fills for you. And what it's essentially saying is that this recycler view should match the width of the view that it's encapsulated. Oh, I forgot to text bigger again. Sorry. Here we go. And it didn't change anything. Cool. Whatever. And it will be the width of the view that is encapsulated in, the height of the view that is encapsulated in. So to reference this recycle view in our code, which is invisible to us right now, we need to add an ID. So if we do Android ID at plus or at plus ID recycler, what this is telling Android Studio is that we want it to be identified by recycler and that we want to add an ID to the list of IDs so that we can reference it in our code. So in our main activity, actually let's just run it right now. Let's see what happens. Advisor guide again. Here we have the city lister version 2 with even less content. So we have this recycler view, but we haven't told it what to do yet. So it's invisible to us. It's just there. Now what we need to do next is obviously tell it what to do. Um, recycler views have things called adapters that tell it how to display the content that you wanted to display. And we're going to have to make one of those adapters. So if we expand this app Java and then your package name here, um, you want to go to new Kotlin file slash class, new class, name it city list adapter. So in this file, we're going to define how we want our cities to be displayed. Go my reference. Okay. So in Kotlin, much like Java, you can extend classes, and recycle views in particular want you to extend recycler view adapter for adapters. So let's do that now. I don't have autofill. This is torture. At least I can do that. Um, but this is you might be familiar with this if you use Java. It's basically like saying this, but with a little more things that I will explain later. But for now, what we want to do is we want to make it actually a class inside of a class. No, it's crazy. We want to make this class named Viewholder. Adapters like holders, which hold the views. It's pretty self-explanatory. It just holds all the views and it presents them to the adapter so they can change. That's really all you need to know. I will explain what I'm doing later. So, what does this all mean? We just created a class that's called Viewholder inside of our city list adapter, which is actually referenced up here. And we need a way to get the actual view inside of the view holder. So we make a parameter called root. and we are going to use this root parameter to do lots of things. By the way, if you're wondering what I was doing with that magical automatic import, on macOS I'm pressing Option Enter, and on Windows it is Alt Enter, I think, or Control Enter. But if you hover over it, you'll get the same thing. Um, so inside of here, um, we have nothing to do yet because we need to make a view. Or sorry, we need to make a layout for our views. So our layout is going to be very simple. It's just going to be a simple text view that says the city's name. So what we're going to go to is App, Res, Layout, right click, go to New Layout Resource File. I'm going to name mine City Item. And we want to change the root element to, actually, it's a same default. So just keep it as linear layout if it's like that. If it's not, change it to linear layout like this. And we're going to press OK. And we can see it has a view, not unlike the other one that we looked at earlier. So I'm going to switch to the text layout, and I am going to create a simple text view. And I am going to give it an ID like we did with our recycler view. And I'm going to make it city name, so we can reference the city name later in our code in the adapter. I'm going to give it these values. You don't really need to know what wrap content does. All you need to know is that it makes it just fit whatever it needs to render inside of the smallest space possible. So let's do San Diego. So now we have this text view saying San Diego. But the problem is, if we stack these all on top of each other in our recycler view, it would look very ugly because there's no space around it for other city names to breathe. So that's where our margins come in. So since this linear layout is what's called the root of our layout, we can change it and we can give it padding. So if we do Android padding equals 12 dp. By the way, dp is basically just Android's version of the pixels. It's they're DPI dependent and independent, which means no matter what size of screen people are looking on, it'll always look visually the same because it doesn't depend on pixels. But all you really need to know is that it's a unit of measurement. So we're going to give a 12 dp border around each side of our view. See, we have one here, and actually one over here, and one over here. I think the blueprint shows that. Yeah. Now we have our simple city item, and now we need to actually make it do things, like actually show a city name. So one of the things our adapter does is when given like a data set, it tells the recycle view how to show that data set, right? But we need that into our adapter. So we're going to add a parameter to our adapter. And Kotlin has this nice mutable list class. We're going to add in here. So now is the city list adapter has a variable called cities, which it can access to list through all the cities. And that variable is simply a list of strings that we can change. So if we go back into our main activity, um, let's see how we can attach our adapter to that recycler view. First, let's make a variable that makes a new city list adapter. As you notice, it will yell at us if we don't give it a list of cities. So we're going to make one at the top of our main activity class so we can keep track of our cities. So val cities equals mutable list of. This is just a nice shorthand function that Kotlin provides, so you can make mutable lists. So I'm going to San Diego, comma, I don't know, Seattle, Cupertino, New York City. So we have our initial list of cities, so we can pass this to our adapter. There we go. Now it has a list of cities, but it has no idea what to do with them. We'll figure that out later. So we actually have not added our adapter to the recycler view yet, despite all of this code. Um, and what I find really cool about Kotlin is how you can actually reference these views, like the recycler view, from inside of your code without ever doing any manual work. All you have to just do is recycler, and in my case, I have to add it. There we go. Look at that, and automatically does all of that stuff for us. Very nice. So all we have to do is type in recycler, which again is the ID that we assigned it earlier. Oh, let me open chat. There we go. And all we have to do is recycler.adapter equals list adapter. Easy as that. So my guess is that if we run this now, it won't work because it's missing some methods from recycler_view.adapter. So what I'm going to do is you can either press this little light bulb here or do that shortcut I mentioned earlier, and you press implement members. You're going to select all three by holding down Command or Control, clicking on each of them, press OK. And what Android Studio will do is make these methods for you. What each of these do define a certain behavior in this adapter. So when the recycle view asks, well, how many items are in this data set? It's going to return this get item count here. So we already know this, and we can say return cities dot size because there will always be um, this many cities in our list. So when the recycle view asks, it'll return the length of the cities array that we have. So now these two are a bit complex, and I won't go into them too much. But all you really need to know here is that this onCreate viewholder is what creates. It does all the creation of this viewholder class that we made down here, and it creates the space that has the text view, and so we can set it later. So I have this boilerplate code that I made earlier because it's really a pain to actually write manually. So I'm going to paste it in Twitch. And it's not very important what it does at the moment. If you get into Android development, you will learn very quickly what it does. There you go. There's some code. I posted in Twitch chat. Um, by the way, all this code will be uploaded to GitHub, and we will have support in SRND chat if you do get stuck. Oh, my battery's draining. Cool. Uh, um, so, sort of like on Create Viewholder, onBind Viewholder takes the viewholder that we created earlier, and it does things with it. So, uh, really, we have no reference to the text view. So we can't change this text view yet. Um, and our goal with this text view, obviously, is to show the city name in the list, but that's not possible right now. Um, so in our view holder, we also need to make a variable called text view. So what this does is it takes our root that we defined earlier, and it searches for a text view with this city name ID. So inside of this, it searches for text view. There it is. So um, it becomes available to anything else that needs it. So if we do holder.textView.text equals cities position, um, it will set it. It will set the to name of the city. And this is actually called for every single item in the list, which is why we have this position. So the recycler view uh, knows what what item in the list we're rendering, and so we have the context and all that good stuff. So we know exactly which city to put in here. So let's see what happens if we compile this. I'm not actually entirely sure what would happen. My guess is that it will probably crash. It didn't crash. Instead, it did nothing. Yeah, it's just there. Hmm, neat. Okay, so this is really all we need to do on our adapter for now. Instead, we need to head back to our main activity, and we actually need to add some uh, properties to our recycler view. So let's do recycler dot set has fixed size to true. Basically means we have a fixed array size. It does a bunch of stuff internally. All you need to know is that it's important. And something that recycler views also need is called layout managers. The layout manager tells the recycler view whether it's going vertically or horizontally, how big it's supposed to be, where it's supposed to fit, if it's tiling, and a bunch of other stuff. We're going to use a simple one called linear layout manager. Um, uh, Linear layout manager, and we also need to pass it a context, which is the main activity. So we're just going to pass it this. So in the recycler, we also need to give it the uh, layout manager equals layout man. So by default, this is probably going to be horizontal. So if we do layout man dot orientation cycler view dot vertical, all of this code right here, you how to render, and it's very boilerplatey, and I don't really like doing it. But hey, that's what you have to do. So now if we run it, we will probably get something this time. Ah, here we go. So we have San Diego. You see the problem here? Our list takes up the entire page. Each item does, which is not ideal. But we do have our cities in here. So um, the root of the problem is actually in our city item layout here. If you notice in our linear layout, we have the width and height set to match parent. So obviously it will match whatever space it can fill within the parent view, which is, in this case, literally all of it. So we're going to change the height to wrap content. See how this automatically collapsed into only the space it needs. So if we press the arrow button and re-add it, there we go. Our list is now better. And the next step, of course, is to make it look better. We need to polish up this feature before we can start on our next. So recycler views also have these things called decorations. Decorations are these little things that surround each item in the list. See this very thin line? We're going to be adding those. is very simple to add. So if we do recycler dot add item decoration, and we're going to be calling the divider item decoration. Yep, for layout man. So we need to add this divider item decoration with this main activity as the context and the orientation from the layout manager so it knows which way to put the decoration. So if we restart, that one line of code should yield us small lines. Ta-da! There we go. Perfect. Um, Next step, we need to add the add button. This one right here. So we need to get a component called the floating action button, which is what it's called. So we're going to reopen our Gradle build script. And I have it right here. There we go. So I'm going to add the material design library from Google, and that will include the floating action button within it, along with a bunch of other uses. But we're only going to be using the floating, the floating action button for now. All right, here we go. It was quick. So let's go back into our activity main, which obviously is going to fail preview. So here's a cool tip. If anything fails in your project, probably want to go to build clean projects, and the problem usually gets solved. There we go. It just fixed. It I don't know. It's black magic, I think. But um, we need to add our floating action button, right? So what's useful about the relative layout is that since everything is relative to each other, we can just shove our floating action button in the corner and say we want it to go in the corner and never go anywhere else. So you're going to want to add the floating action button by opening a bracket here and starting to type floating action button. But since my autocomplete is disabled because Android Studio crashes, I am going to paste the fully qualified name there. And Android Studio, again, will do all that for you. But in my case, I have to do it manually. So this is what you should have right now. You should have this button in the top left, just sitting there, doing nothing. And to move it back to the corner that we want, is we're going to need to tell Android how to position it. So layout, line, parent, end. This parameter right here says, do I want it to align at the end, which is the right side in our case, of the parent view? We say yes, yes we do. There it goes, it moves instantly. Now let's do another one. Layout, line, parent, bottom. Does the same thing, but for the bottom, yes, there it is, but that's way too stuff in the corner for our list item. This time, let's make it 18 BP. There we go. It's perfectly positioned exactly where we want it. But you might notice there's no icon. Well, Android Studio doesn't actually add any icons to your project by default. We're going to have to do them ourselves. So in our app uh, res drawable, we're going to right click on drawable and say we want a new vector asset. And we're going to change this little Android guy into plus button. So, or I guess it's called add. Yeah, it's called add. So we're going to type add and search for these material icons. Press OK. We're going to change the color to okay. We're going to change the color to white. And there we go. We have a white add button. So we're going to change also this text to white. And that'll fit perfectly within our our little button here. So we're gonna press next, press finish. There we go. Android Studio generated this wonderful icon for us. And how we use it is we actually use a special parameter called source compat, which basically means it's the source of the image. Um, that's going to be displayed inside of the floating action button. And the compat you don't need to worry about. That's a result of years of frag, and it's ugly. So once we're done with that, yours should have auto-completed, by the way. I had to type the entire thing. Once we have our icon set inside of the source action button, you see we have a plus sign inside our run our app right now. Okay. Wow. I think it crashed. Let's check the logs. Hmm. What? Let's learn a fundamental programming skill, debugging. I have no clue what's going on. Oh, I think it's because this button doesn't have an ID. Let's name it Add City Button. Nope, crashed again. Where are you talking to me about? 17? Hmm, interesting. Ah, huh. I'm comparing this with my sample code that I wrote over here, and it's the exact same. I think it has something to do with Android Studio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this, and since it is a beta version of Android Studio, I'm going to go back into the stable version, which also crashes for some reason. And we go into Preferences, disable autocomplete so it doesn't crash again. Nope, auto completion. There we go. So now we wait for it to build. So while this is building, let's talk about what we're going to do next. So we have our floating action button, right? And right now it doesn't do anything. If we compiled it and it ran successfully on my phone, if we tapped it, it would do precisely 0 things. It wouldn't even animate because there's nothing attached to it yet. So what we're going to do next is write some code in our main activity to make it so that this dialog box pops up when we tap the button. It looks like Android Studio is done. Let's run the app. Or not. Oh, oh, there it goes. Aha, perfect. Yes, it was Android Studio's fault. So, see, we have our floating action button, and you can't see it, but I'm actually clicking it, and nothing's happening right now. So we need to add some functionality to that. There we go. We have the big font back too. Perfect. Um, so we named our button Add City button, right? So we're going to add city button dot set on click listener, and whatever is inside of these little brackets here is going to run. So to make sure everything works, we're going to make what's called a toast. It's a little notification that pops up at the bottom of your screen. To do so, we can do toast.make text. Add that toast.make text. I am lost on my autofill. We're gonna name it worked, and we need to tell the toast how long to stay it for. Let's do length long, and then we're gonna show it. So when we tap on our button, it should do that thing. It works. So as you can see, it also has that nice ripple animation on it now since it has functionality attached. So we need to make an alert box, right? So to do that, Android has this wonderful class called Alert Dialog. And to do so, we're going to need to make what's called a builder. If you ever use Java, you're probably familiar with builder patterns, but we're going to make a builder in here. You can do that by making a new alert dialog.builder. If it prompts you for this, you're going to want to select the Android X one. So uh, with our builder, we can do lots of things to our alert dialog, like set the title. So we're going to set the title to add a city. And there's actually no built-in class to make our little text box that we have inside of here. So we are going to have to make it ourselves, which is not a big deal. So we're going to make an edit text programmatically inside of our code by doing this. Edit text equals edit text this. So we're making a variable called edit text, which is equal to a new edit text, which has the main activity as the context. So with our builder, we can also set custom views. So we're going to set our custom view to the edit text. There we go. But now we need to add some buttons to our alert dialog. So set the positive button to add, and then we're going to add a curly bracket there. Oh, and then it's going to yell at us because it wants parameters. So we're going to add this little thing here, which tells it that we aren't going to use this parameter or this parameter. And this arrow just defines the function. So when this add button is pressed, we want to add whatever is in that edit text to the list of cities, correct? So we're going to do cities dot add and edit text dot text dot toString. So our cities will have that new city inside of it, but our recycler view doesn't know that. So we're actually need to tell our adapter to tell the recycler view to refresh. So we're going to do list adapter notify data set changed, and that will notify it that there has been a change in our data set and to refresh. And for our final button, we're going to add a cancel button. And we're going to name it cancel. And we don't want to do anything except close the dialog when it's pressed. So we're just going to put the listener as null. And once our dialog has been built, we can show it. And since we've done all this, I'm going to press the play button. Open my phone over here once it's done. And if we tap this, we have our wonderful add a city dialog box. So I'm going to add Carlsbad. Just add, and you see we have Carlsbad in this list, and we can type anything in this box, and it will add. And our cancel button also works. So we can add as many cities as we want, or at least as many as our phone's RAM allows. So that's neat. What's next? We need to add a delete function, which is probably the simplest. So we need to head over to our city list adapter. And inside of this onBind view holder, we're going to bind some functionality to this root here. So if we do holder dot root dot set on click listener, we're going to make another dialog box. Fun. Do the same thing we did last time, except for the context. We need to add the roots context inside of here because adapters don't provide a context for reasons. All you need to know is that this is what you need to do. This time, let's set our title to delete this city. And then we're going to set the message inside of the box to confirm that you want to delete. And then we're going to use some special like 200 IQ Kotlin string manipulation. And inside of here, anything inside of these curly brackets, like a $ curly bracket, anything inside of here will be executed as code, but it will be inside of the string. So we can do cities, position, and this will end up as confirm that you want to delete San Diego, Seattle, blah, blah, blah. And this is very good wording because it's like you're actually deleting the entire city of San Diego. We're going to add a button like we did earlier, delete. Now, deleting an entire city doesn't sound so positive, but trust me, it is. And inside of here, we're going to move at position. This basically tells this array we want to get rid of this element at that position. And then we need to notify our own adapter that the data set has changed. So now you might be wondering, why don't we have like anything before it like we did last time? Well, it's because we're already in the adapter, so we just need to notify ourselves that something changed. Let's add that one button, cancel, no. Like we did exactly the same earlier. So show this dialog. Let's run this app. And that, if this works, then I think we're done. So let's try deleting San Diego. Delete. Ah, there it goes. San Diego's gone. No longer exists. But I want San Diego back, so I'm going to add it back. Very cool. It works. So let's add the finishing touches. In here, as you might have noticed, if I tap on the, if I tap here, which I'm doing right now, you can't see, but I am. If I tap here, you notice there's no ripple effect like behind Seattle. That's because we don't have a special background. And I'm going to add that background here. Android has a special background for selectable items that tells it to draw the ripple when it's tapped. And if you type selectable item background, it should autofill for you, but I had to type it out again because autocomplete. Um, so now, if we run this app again and it compiles successfully, and it runs on my phone, we have a nice ripple effect when we tap it. So we can destroy cities in style. The earth is gone. There we go. Our city lister is complete. Now, if you've been following along, that's great. And if you ran into any problems during our stream, like I did, like with Android Studio crashing and if something happened, um, all of this code will be posted on GitHub for you to use later. And we will have live support um, available in SR&D chat. I'll be there. So if you have any questions specific to this project, let me know. And I'm going to leave you off with a couple of things to consider adding to this app. Let me size this correctly. There we go. So um, before I go, I want you to consider the ability of editing cities inside of the app. See how you could implement that. How you could add pictures to the cities in the list with an image view. How if you could add short descriptions to each city, or if you wanted to turn the list items into cards with the card view. And if you're wondering what a card view is, well, there's plenty of resources available out there, and I encourage you to take a look at them. And if you need any help, we're always here to help out. That concludes our presentation, and you have now built your first Android app, and you can show all your friends that you can destroy the Earth by just tapping cities. All right, I think that's about it.